Hey Shakers, and welcome to Worth Your Salt, the podcast that shakes up your marketing game in the health and wellness industry. Worth Your Salt is brought to you by Salt Marketing. Salt Marketing helps health and wellness practitioners build trust and authority to attract a steady stream of inbound wellness seekers. For more information, you can visit us online at saltmarketing.co. I'm Jennifer Orqua, Story Brand Certified Guide, Marketing Strategist with Salt Marketing, and your host for today's episode of Worth Your Salt. Now, whether you're a yoga instructor with dreams of opening your own studio or a supplement entrepreneur eyeing market expansion, there comes a time when navigating the dollars and cents of your operation can feel like wading through murky waters. That's when adding a fractional CFO to your team might make sense. While other financial advisors, like a bookkeeper, might look to the past to help you make decisions, a CFO sits next to you, right in the front seat, and helps you navigate by looking out the windshield instead of in the rear view, guiding you through fiscal challenges and helping you chart a course for growth. Joining me today is Kyle Smith, CPA and fractional CFO with Strata Cloud Accountants. Kyle believes passionately in helping small and medium-sized businesses thrive. With years of experience as a trusted advisor, Kyle brings a wealth of knowledge on how a CFO can transform the financial landscape for practitioners like you. Kyle, I appreciate you joining me today on Worth Your Salt.
Super excited to be here, Jennifer.
So, Kyle, I know you focus on providing expert financial guidance for small businesses, but tell me a little bit about your background and about Strata Cloud Accountants and how you became a co-partner there.
Sure. So actually started in the restaurant industry in Austin, Texas. My dad was a restaurateur and kind of grew up around that. And he started some restaurants here, and I joined him right out of college and learned a ton, mostly things that not to do and ways to improve and ways to get better. But I learned a lot about accounting, a lot about, as you mentioned, forward-looking items like forecasting and budgeting, and how important looking forward is to making sure that a business is successful. Also had dreams of being a professional poker player, which surprisingly has a lot of parallels to finance and being a CFO. But when I was working with my dad and also on the side working as a poker player semi-professionally, I realized poker is a net zero game where if someone wins, other people have to lose. But with finance and CFO, I can help people and they can win and I can win too. That's where I decided poker is not for me. I want to go into accounting and finance and see if I can help the most people possible. And so from there, worked with restaurants and bars in the Austin area, and then moved to a company called Scale Factor here in Austin. And we had a crash course for about 18 months of businesses of all different avenues and industries, and learned a lot about the health and wellness industry, and took that knowledge as Scale Factor was kind of transitioning into software. We took on the services side and said, we can help a lot of these customers. 3 years ago, me and two other partners made that jump and started our own firm. Goal of helping people look forward, pivot their business, make sure that the goals are aligned, and make sure that their financial processes are sound. Because I think it was Mike Tyson that said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. I take that as that doesn't mean you abandon the plan.
Yep.
You just need to constantly be adjusting. So being a CFO, working with small businesses, that's what we do, is help the businesses adjust so they can make sure they're not leaving money on the table.
I love that. And I love that your history includes poker. That's fascinating. So how can having a CFO on board help a health and wellness business make smart financial decisions, things that would go beyond what a regular accountant might offer?
An accountant is primarily looking back, which is super important. But what a CFO does is take that additional strategic step and say, what does it look like if we go forward? So that could be scenario analysis, making sure that you have a budget. And then every month we're measuring. That's the big key CFO function, is measuring and then pivoting. So for instance, we had a business that their revenue when we were working with them right off the bat was about 40 grand less 1 month than they expected it to be, which was a big number. And we went back in, and everything that they were doing was session based, and their employees were responsible for a certain amount of sessions per month and week, and they weren't hitting that. So they went back with that knowledge, and they were able to start monitoring more on a weekly basis to make sure that everybody was hitting their numbers, which was important for them on the operational side. But what we were able to do on the CFO side, different from what like a bookkeeper or an accountant would do, is run a scenario analysis on, hey, what if for the rest of the year they did those less session count numbers? Could they still break even? Could they still make money, or would they lose money? And what would the cash position look like at the end of the year? All of those things are super critical when you're making decisions on, how do I expand? Am I going to have enough money to open a new location? Do I need to go to a bank? Should I go to investors? Those decisions, compounded over time, could be tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars plus And those are the things that we look at and provide thought leadership, working with small business owners to make sure they're making the right decisions.
Yeah, that's a great explanation of what a CFO actually does. I know you're also a CPA. Mm-hmm. So how does that role differ? I mean, my CPA helps me forecast and figure out, what my taxes are going to be and those sorts of things. So how does this role differ?
Sure. So there's a lot of overlap. And, literally a CPA just means that I took the tests that I needed to take to be qualified. And, the state said that I'm qualified to be an accountant, a certified accountant. Mm-hmm. That comes with basically, I have the ability to set up a tax preparation service, for instance. And I also have knowledge on the financial side that is adequate for what they decided was acceptable. Mm-hmm. So it's just a designation. CPAs can do everything that a CFO does and vice versa, theoretically. So really what a CFO, is specialized in is forward-looking financials, making sure that the financial processes are accurate, because you can't project on numbers that aren't good or accurate. But that's the big difference, is a CPA can do everything. There's no restrictions on what a CPA can do. A CPA can also help on the tax strategy side. I primarily look on the operational side, and we have a CPA that does the tax side that we work in partnership with. And along with the business owner, we're kind of quarterbacking the relationship between the operations, the tax strategy, and what we're doing as CFOs.
Interesting. So give me some examples of the type of financial forecasting a CFO does. I mean, you said that you kind of lean into the operational side of things, but you're also kind of looking overall at the entire strategy and where things are going. What kind of forecasting do you do?
Usually we're starting with budgets for the year. And so obviously that requires accurate financial info going in. But assuming you have that, we want to make sure that forward-looking, there is a budget that then we can measure against month to month. And then once we have that budget, we're looking with the business owner and saying, hey, here's your profit and loss. And when I say that, profit and loss statement is basically your revenues minus all of your expenses. And that's a critical piece to look at to make sure, hey, if we're expecting this amount of revenue, does this equal a profit at the end of the month, or is this a loss? And if it's a loss, where are the areas that we can help save? So for instance, if we did some analysis with a client and found that they have a very little leeway on how much they can sell before they start losing money, we'll start looking at their fixed costs, which is like their rent or maybe their salary structure in the business, and make sure that it makes sense to the amount of revenue that they have. Mm-hmm. And we can address that, in January of the year or the year before, instead of them going halfway through the year and saying, why are we losing money? Mm-hmm. So that's one of the big keys. And then taking the additional step of building a cash budget. And that's super critical, because it's great to know what you're projected to do on a profit and loss, but there's also things that affect cash that are outside of the operations of the business that we want to compare against and make sure that the business owner knows, hey, here's how much cash you're expected to have in the bank at the end of quarter one, out of quarter two. And let's see, if you open 2 locations, what does that look like? 1 location. Or if you're expecting to break even for this year, what's it going to take to make a profit of 10%? So those type of scenarios that then back into what their lifestyle goals might be outside of the business. All those things we're trying to balance and provide guidance on to make sure that the business is going the direction that the business owner wants it to go.
That makes sense. And so specifically in health and wellness, how can having a CFO guide decision-making and improve our outlook?
We worked with a client and they wanted to go from sole proprietor. She was just on her own and wanting to expand to 30 employees in a 2-year span. And as we were doing that and thinking through it, one of the biggest critical pieces that we needed to answer was, what did the admin team look like if you're growing that big? If you have one studio and you're looking to expand to 3 or 4 very quickly, what's it going to take on the administrative side to effectively deliver that as you grow? And then what's it going to take, more on the direct cost side, things that are directly related to the revenue of the business or the revenue drivers. And we separated those out and saw that in this case, the admin team that she was projected to have, and that as we were growing, was a lot bigger than she initially expected. So we were able to address that earlier and kind of right-size the admin team as the business grew to make sure that there wasn't too heavy of a administrative burden on producing profit, meaning if the admin team was growing too big, too fast, they were going to quickly start losing money. So we were able to address that. So the moral of the story was we needed to separate out the administrative team from the rest of the expenses of the business to then get a better sense of how do we structure this as they grow so that they aren't using up too much cash too quickly, trying to grow.
Yeah. Those are fantastic insights. That's really fascinating. No wonder you love what you do. I have to take a quick sponsorship break right now. When we come back, I want to talk about the role that KPIs can play in aligning our personal goals with the business vision.
The Worth Your Salt podcast is grateful to our partners and sponsors, including Annie Schiffman's Simple Social Media. If you've ever struggled to keep up on social media, you know it can be a relentless, overwhelming time suck. But if you don't use social media, you're missing out on one of the best ways to increase exposure to your brand and develop loyal fans. Author Annie Schiffman's new book, Simple Social Media, explains why now is the best time to do less on social media. She's created an evergreen strategy built for professionals that you can implement to take the pressure off. Annie's pager method for simplifying social media was called Genius on the Marketing Made Simple podcast. Just think about how great it would be to spend less time on social media and more time building your business. Simple Social Media will show you how your marketing team can be consistent and authentic on social media in a fraction of the time. Get the book now at simplesocialmediabook.com and get social presence without the pressure. That's simplesocialmediabook.com.
I'm back here on the Worth Your Salt podcast with Kyle Smith, fractional CFO and co-partner at Strata Cloud Accountants. So, Kyle, let's talk about dreams. How could a CFO help a health and wellness business turn those big expansion plans into reality?
Looking at the different aspects of the business, and you mentioned KPIs, that's a big one. So if you were looking to expand, one of the biggest measurables that we would look at is, are you going to have enough cash? And most businesses fail. I think it's 60, 70% of businesses fail because they don't have enough cash. And cash is required the most when you're expanding. So you could be riding very high and looking to expand and being super excited and even have a great business model. But if your cash is going to get short as you're growing and you're not planning for that, you could get into a really tough situation, because the other side of that coin is that banks love to lend when you don't need money and don't like to lend when you need it. Mm-hmm. So it's really critical that you ask beforehand. If you're looking to expand, a lot of the time might be a good option. You need to ask the question of how much cash you're going to need. And usually with our expertise working with businesses, we find out that it's a lot more than they think it's going to be. And so the key is setting up certain things like a line of credit, which is, contingent upon whether you need it or not. So I really believe in lines of credit as a great potential resource. And those are best put in place when you have the cash and you're ready to expand, rather than when you're getting short on cash and you need it, because then that's when the bank is a little less sure on lending it to you. So it's really about getting ahead of it and focusing on cash flow and making sure that you're going to have enough.
And I know you're a big believer in using those KPIs that we talked about to boost profitability. Tell me a little bit about what KPIs are and why you think they're important.
So this one's overwhelming to a lot of business owners. And when they hear KPI, and this is probably me too, my eyes kind of glossed over. And I thought, I'm a financial guy, I better find out what that is. And really, it stands for key performance indicator. And really what that means is it's a measurable. We work with 5 essential ones with every business that we work with that we say you have to measure every month. And so when I say measurable, all of these, the five KPIs, they're on the profit and loss statement. So at a minimum, it's really critical for a business owner. And, a CFO can be you as the business owner. But there has to be a CFO function in the business. You have to look at the profit and loss statement at least monthly. And so that way you can look at these KPIs and see how you're doing. So a simple example is revenue is one of those must measure KPIs. And that's one that everybody knows about and is confident explaining. So it's something that you don't need to get overwhelmed by, but you do need to look at your profit and loss statement once a month, whether that's you, that's a fractional CFO like what we do at Strata Cloud, or an in-house CFO. You've got to have that CFO function of looking at the financials, because that's the first step, and then being able to project and do all the things that I talked about previously related to forecasting and making the best plan for your business.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, in health and wellness, there's very complex workflows that we have to deal with. So how do we use KPIs to find those efficiencies operationally and presumably find more profit?
A big one is separating those costs. The costs that are fixed, meaning it doesn't matter what revenue volume you're doing, the costs are going to be the same. So a big example there is rent, separating those costs out from costs that, will be directly related to the revenue. So if you have a yoga studio, it'd be like a teacher that's working on a per session basis. So if you separate those out, it's really critical then, because you can look at the percentages as a percentage of sales for those costs, and you can start making decisions on the business. And one that I mentioned before, if your ratio of those costs compared to administrative costs or fixed costs is too high, you're going to have really a lot of trouble making a profit. So that's what we start by looking at is, does the gross profit, which means your direct costs, make sense? Is it high enough? And is your overhead, which that's your fixed costs like rent, is that structure reasonable based on your sales volume to be able to consistently make a profit month to month? And so that's one of the biggest ways we use it, is structuring the business. Because if we see that, hey, you can triple your sales and you're still going to have a lot of trouble making a profit, as an extreme example, how do we make sure that the business is set up to where you can hit your sales goals and make a healthy profit on the bottom line, so your personal goals are met if you're sole proprietor or if you're an executive group trying to hit your goals for the year?
I think that's a perspective that a lot of us don't have, particularly when we're starting out or even just a few years in. I'm wondering if you have any stories of clients who have successfully optimized their business based on those KPIs.
Oh, yes. Tons. I gave one before. We had another business. They had a gross profit percentage drop drastically from one month to the next. And they found out basically what you have to pay your teaching team. If that goes up drastically, and you're not looking at it in relation to the business as a whole, you don't know how much that's affecting your business, your profit, and your cash. So in this case, their gross profit went way down from one month to the next. And it was because one of those input costs, basically the cost that you would have to pay a yoga teacher, for instance, shot up because of a shortage. And they were able to address that, and they were able to fix it in that month by addressing the price. So they actually were able to raise price, and they were able to substitute a different input cost, which may not always be an option. But my point is, they were able to find the problem and address it because of the work that we did together. And they saved, in this case, tens of thousands of dollars every month. And that's the biggest thing that I like to impart, is that you can't, if you don't address these issues and you don't address changes in your cost structure, for instance, that's going to compound every month that you don't address it. So if it's a $5,000 mistake one month that you don't address, that's going to compound every single month that you don't make a change. So that's why it's critical to, like I said, measure. And that's really what KPIs are. It's just measuring the profit and loss statement as an example to make sure that you're finding those things that might stick out from one month to the next, so they don't compound and it doesn't turn into a six-figure mistake at the end of the year.
And clearly having a CFO by our side to help with that and identify those things quickly is really the turning point there.
Absolutely.
All right, Kyle, it's time for another quick break. We'll be right back after this. Hey, Salt Nation, you're listening to the Worth Your Salt podcast. I'm Jennifer Orqua, and today I'm talking with fractional CFO Kyle Smith about how you can gain financial freedom, reach your dreams, and have a partner that helps you focus on a healthy family work-life balance. We'd love to hear your thoughts on hiring a CFO, so be sure to join Salt Marketing over on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook, and let us know how you're using your financial data to help plan your future. So, Kyle, are there certain points in a health and wellness business's growth where it's like, okay, now we really need a CFO?
Yes, it's a tough question because, when we had a business that I talked about before that went from 0 to 30 employees in like less than a 2-year span, in that case, the return on investment to having a CFO, by your side as a strategic thought leader in that case, because of all of the aspects of growing that quickly, I would say it really doesn't really matter what your revenue is at that point. You'd want a fractional CFO at least just to bounce ideas off of and have a budget and forecast in place, because that's rapid growth. So on one hand, I would say if you're looking to grow rapidly, it's pretty essential to have that CFO function ready and have your forward-looking financial forecast ready to go. Because of like what I talked about before as well, the cash is going to be very critical to make sure that you don't run short as you're expanding. A lot of people like to talk about needing a CFO kind of based on revenue, and that's super broad as well. But usually if you're going over $1 million or $2 million in revenue and you feel like I'm kind of losing a handle on the financial aspect of the business, and I'm not sure what it's going to look like if we try to open another location next year, for instance, that might be a time to bring in a CFO. But if you're much larger than that, I would say definitely be looking for a CFO function to be input in the business. And that's a really cool thing about what we do is we're really that bridge between zero to in-house CFO. And that's a pretty wide range. And the idea is that we can really do a lot of the same things that an in-house CFO can do, but we're tailoring it to your business size and we're working with you to do the things that are most important to make sure that the business is successful.
Yeah. So going back to, really understanding whether you've got the cash to make something happen, let's just say, I've got a brilliant idea for a new wellness product or service. How can a CFO figure out if I've got that cash to make it happen?
Yeah. The biggest thing is a 3-way forecast. So a lot of the times, and even maybe a bookkeeper or controller can put together a profit and loss forecast. But to put together a full 3-way forecast, meaning it's a profit and loss, a balance sheet, and a cash flow forecast, that's the biggest difference. So we can put all those together and then make determinations on the business. And one big example, if you self-fund a business growth, meaning you go to a bank and get a loan, that matters really critically in the amount of cash that gets kept in the business in the long term. Because if you're successful with what you do, you'll be able to pay the bank back and you'll be able to keep all of the rest of the cash. So that means more cash in the business in the long run. And that's something that we'll forecast out compared to, say, you take on outside investors, depending on that structure, you're going to be giving them cash for the rest of time in terms of that business operating. So that's going to change the equation for how much cash gets kept in the business in the long term. In that case, less cash is going to be kept in the long term. But the upside of taking investors is if you're not as successful as you think you are going to be, you've got the buffer where they're not going to get paid until you're making a profit. So you've got more time with their cash to make the business succeed compared to a bank. The bank wants their money on the bank schedule. So you have less upside there, or you have less leeway based on how successful the business is. So those are the type of things that we look at with business owners and say, what makes the most sense for you right now? And what are you most comfortable with? And that really helps down the road. So people aren't waking up in the middle of the night worrying about that thing and whether they're financing it correctly.
Yeah. So speaking about getting a little bit down the road, let's dream a little bit bigger. So how can a CFO help prep a health and wellness company for that Cinderella moment when somebody wants to buy us out?
Yeah. 2 things. The biggest one, and this might sound basic, but accurate financials are huge. I've heard stories and been part of jumping in kind of late on certain clients in this process where they've had other potential buyers get scared off because those buyers are usually very savvy. And when they dig into the books and see very quickly that, hey, something's not right, that sends them running, even if the business is doing very well and very successful and could be a great opportunity. Not having the books in the right spot and having accurate baseline numbers is a big turnoff for a potential buyer. So that's one, at a base level, making sure that the financial processes are set and you're getting good financial statements. So that's one. And then the second thing is having the CFO there where the potential buyer would know, hey, they have a CFO, so I can trust these numbers. And a lot of the time we'll jump on if there's a due diligence meeting. We'll jump on and be the CFO on that call and answer questions on the financial side, which I've done recently. That's a huge benefit to the potential buyer saying, hey, these people have their financials buttoned up. They have a CFO who's answering questions and knows the numbers, knows what to expect. And that makes them trust the projections that we do a lot more, obviously with the goal of maximizing the sales price for the business owner.
Yeah. So say I want all this brilliance for myself. I want to learn more about you. I want to learn about Strata Cloud Accountants, what you guys can do for me. Where can I go?
Yeah, so our website is stratacloudaccountants.com, and we have an exclusive page for the Worth Your Salt listeners. It's stratacloudaccountants.com/salt. And I have a downloadable KPI tracker with just the things that we were talking about that takes less than 30 minutes a month that I hope people can at least get some value right off the bat from that. And I go through that in a video as well. So just some content for your listeners, and hopefully with the goal of helping people become more financially savvy.
Yeah, that's outstanding. I'm going to go take advantage of that myself. And of course, links to everything that Kyle mentioned will be available on our website at saltmarketing.co. But right now it is time for our lightning round questions. And Kyle, these are a few quick questions I like to ask of every guest. Are you ready?
Okay, ready.
All right. First question is, what's something about you that surprises people?
That I used to play professional poker.
That's true. That's a very good one. All right. Next question. What's your favorite thing about the work that you do?
Helping people and not having to lose doing it. Both people can win. So yeah, it's just helping lots of people in lots of different areas.
Very nice. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Don't let perfection be the enemy of progress.
Yes, I like that one very much. All right, last question. Who or what inspires you?
My family. Got a 3-month-old right now, and
Wow.
It's amazing to watch him kind of learn the world, and it reminds me of how much I don't know. Yeah. So that perspective is really inspiring me right now.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of Worth Your Salt, Kyle.
Thanks, Jennifer. It was awesome to be here.
I also want to thank our listeners and let you know that if you're ready for your Worth Your Salt debut, tell us about your expertise by emailing us at grow@saltmarketing.co. Of course, be sure to subscribe on our website so you never miss an episode. And finally, leave us a review or give the show a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's all for this episode of Worth Your Salt. Be sure to join me again next time. In the meantime, let's get out there and shake things up.